This is Dates and Mates with your host, Damona Hoffman.
Hello, lovers. Welcome to Dates and Mates. This is your source for modern love advice. We are going to demystify modern love for you. I am so excited about today's show. I have a special guest in studio with me today, Rhonda Richards-Smith. She's an award-winning psychotherapist and relationship expert. Her advice has been featured in Us Weekly, in the Huffington Post, Bravo TV, Ebony Magazine, Teen Vogue, and Glamour Magazine, among others. And I'm so excited that she's joining me today. We met at the Match Summit. We were among the top dating experts in the country that Match.com brought in to talk about what's happening with online dating today. And she's going to talk about online dating, about marriage, and building a relationship that can really stand the test of time. So please give big smooches to Rhonda Richards-Smith.
Thank you for having me. So exciting.
I'm so excited that you're here with us. And you just have such a breadth of experience in talking to people about dating and relationships. So I thought, well, why not bring Rhonda in so that we can really talk about what's happening in modern love today? And we have headlines, girl. We have headlines.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. We'll be talking about a dating policy that's changing at a top university. We also will discuss how Olympic athletes are getting hot and heavy. And a beloved comedian finally ties the knot. We'll talk about what might be in store for her and her new boo. Plus, we have thought-provoking questions in Technically Dating that ask, what to do if your husband is active online with other women. We talked about micro-cheating last week. So this is interesting that this came up this week, and we'll elaborate on that.
A practical application of the terms we discussed last week.
Do you see? This is why I'm telling you guys real stuff. And this is, and then you see how it really happens in real life, right? So yes, thank you for sending in your questions. We also have questions from, we have a question from a young lady who asks, what to do when your BFF goes out with your ex and asks you to come along? Ooh. I've never dealt with that situation before.
Strange request.
Yeah, we didn't have a precursor to that. There's no warm up. We're just going to drop you right into it today. And also, producer Thomas is here with us.
As always.
I got a text from my dad who said he was listening to today's show. So he asked me to keep it clean. So shout out to you, Pops. I'm going to do my best. Yeah. No promises, but I'm going to do my best.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
So are we ready to do the dish?
I believe we are.
Dee's Dating Dish.
Duke University is looking to change its dating policy. There was an article that was published in the Herald Sun that said up until now, Duke allowed students to have relationships with professors as long as they were not taking a class with them or working on a research project or being mentored. But the Academic Council recently decided, you know what? That just seems too complicated. Why don't we just scrap the whole thing? So now they're saying they're going to rewrite their policy and say that basically undergraduates should not be messing around with graduate students, with TAs, with professors, none of that. And this is something that they think it's just going to be easier. There's just too many loopholes. There's too many hoops to jump through. They're trying to keep themselves out of hot water, Rhonda. And so they're saying they're just going to change the policy. What do you think? Do you think that there's a problem? I mean, they're grown consenting adults, but there is that issue of a power differential. And people could, even with graduate students, sometimes graduate students are responsible for people's grades. Are people starting relationships maybe to boost their grade level here?
It wouldn't be the first time I've heard that. It's quite possible. I mean, I think it's tough. I think there are a lot of discussions right now around consent in terms of relationships. And while I applaud Duke for their efforts to maybe try to resolve some of that, and I think, like you said, get themselves out of hot water to some extent, I do think we probably want to take a look at something different, because policies like this are kind of a back end, like it's almost like a Band-Aid that they're utilizing to try to prevent things from happening. But I think a lot of prevention in terms of issues with consent in relationships happen in childhood. Yeah. So a lot of times we focus on victims or trying to prevent a situation from happening as we get older. But I think we really need to be having the conversations not just with women, but with men as well. and with young boys. I really think that that's really the crux of the issue. And if we focus on consent and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, not just with women, but with men earlier on, I think that would be more effective than a policy like this, because people will always find ways around these policies. I mean, it's fine for now, but ultimately people are always going to find ways around it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's always a
If there's
power
a rule,
differential.
if there's a rule, it's going to be broken. But
Yeah.
I'm generally kind of conservative. Like, you've heard me talk about workplace romance, don't do it. However, in the university setting, things are always changing, and you might have a class with a professor and even a TA who maybe was a student just a year ago. And if you're not, campus is a big place. If you're not really being affected by their influence, I'm not sure that it's really that big of a deal, or that the university really needs to draw such a line in the sand, because I think it's actually going to cause more problems of them trying to police this, because, love knows no boundaries, right?
And it's unfortunate, too, because you spend so much of your time. I mean, 4 years if you're an undergrad, that's a lot of time. You're spending all of your time pretty much at school. And so to have the dating pool kind of significantly decreased in that way, it's tough. I think it just makes it more difficult for people to get to know each other and meet each other on campus, if they have to, double check and, were you ever a professor? Are you a teacher's assistant? Are you, you kind of have to run down the list before you can really even express interest in everyone. So I think it's going to be tough, but people will find a way.
Yeah, especially if they're online dating and they're using these apps that are location based, and they're swiping. You don't know what somebody might do for a living. Maybe they work somewhere else on the campus. You might be in Pyeongchang, and I said it the proper way and not the NBC way.
I'm
Did you hear about this?
impressed. I'm impressed.
No, wait, there's a controversy.
Oh, yeah, there's a controversy because NBC decided that it was easier to say Pyeongchang. They said it was easier. They put out a memo and they're like, we're going to say it Pyeongchang.
Cool.
And everybody's like, no, it's
that's-
Pyeongchang. Chang.
I guess I always have said it Pyeongchang. I'm glad that I know that it's not.
See, this show is educating you on multiple
The
levels.
more you know,
the
I
more
love
you
it.
The more you know. And the athletes are also using these dating apps. 4 years ago, was it 4 years ago? Yeah, 4 years ago, there was a big story that we covered on Tinder that was like the breakout moment for Tinder when all the Olympic athletes were using it. Or was it 6 years ago? No, it was 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago. So anyways, Tinder, that's so 2014 Olympics. Now it's Bumble, y'all. And it's going down in the Olympic Village. Let me tell you, not only are these athletes using the dating apps to hook up, but we can actually now tell which athletes are hooking up the most. So I don't know, Rhonda, how much you know about the Winter Games or who's playing games in the winter, but who would you think would be most likely to hook up? Who would be voted at Olympic Village most likely to hook up? Which athlete, which sport?
I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like the snowboarders are so popular. Like, those are the folks that everyone knows. Everybody knows about. Like, Chloe Kim is like a huge snowboarding star right now. I believe she's like 17, and she won gold. So I don't know. I would guess snowboarders.
Well, they're in the mix, but they actually are the least using the apps the least. Maybe it's because they're so cool. Like, they don't even need the apps.
don't need
People
it.
just
Maybe
come up
that's
to
what
them
it
and they're
is.
like, "Hey, I saw you on your snowboard, girl."
Right.
No, and she's not even 18, so maybe not Chloe. Of course, not Chloe. But let me tell you something about these alpine skiers. They like to go fast. They're careening down the hill and swiping at the same time. It's the alpine skiers that are using the app the most, followed by the hockey players, and then freestyle skiers and cross-country skiers. So basically, it's that ski action that's really that's
Something about
mimicking
those
like
legs.
that, something about those
Like
legs going
back and forth.
Pumping motion.
Yeah.
Producer Thomas, I told you my dad is listening. Why aren't you keeping
Sorry
it clean? Oh my
Mr.
gosh.
Hoffman.
So that's interesting, but I'm not surprised that the dating apps really. I just think it reflects the time that we're in, where people are gathering in places to use dating apps and connect with more people. Because I'm sure that the athletes were dating before, but this just makes it so much easier for them to connect and find athletes that they share similar values or interests with.
And it's such a unique opportunity. I mean, you have athletes from all over the world, literally. To be honest, it's probably an amazing time to use a dating app because you can really get to know people. There are a ton of folks there. And, when they're not competing, they want to let off some steam and have fun.
Yes. Well, they're not the only ones that want to let off some steam and have fun. Amy Schumer, who we've talked about very recently on this show. Remember, we said
up before.
yeah, we said that we just talked about her, I think, even last week, because she had met her ex-boyfriend on Raya, and that made a lot of celebrities say, like, oh, I'm going to use Raya too, because I heard Amy Schumer met her boyfriend on Raya. Well, it didn't work out between those two of them, but maybe her ears were burning because she decided to go ahead and tie the knot with her new boyfriend, who she just met a few months ago. His name is Chris Fisher, and it was a secret DL ceremony in Malibu. Only 80 of their closest friends were invited, and yeah, they've only dated a few months. Rhonda, you're a therapist, and I'm sure you help people get into relationships. You've dealt with people that are in relationships and having challenges. What can Amy and Chris expect to encounter if they've only been dating a few months before marrying? What's going to come up for them as they embark on this next phase of their relationship?
They're definitely going to hit some roadblocks, but I mean, the reality is in any relationship, you're going to experience some roadblocks along the way. I wonder, have they only known each other for a few months, or have they only been dating for a few months? I wonder. Do we know?
Oh, she hit me with the
because that can
nuance.
It depends. I mean, if it's someone that she's known for a while, maybe even just more of an acquaintance, and then they just recently decided to start dating, they might know each other a little better than we think. So it really depends. But anytime a relationship is new, it's exciting. You're in love, you're infatuated with each other, of course. But that's not always going to sustain you throughout the entirety of your relationship. And so you just really want to be sure that you have a solid foundation. I hope that they've spent a lot of quality time with one another. I believe he owns a restaurant somewhere in the Martha's Vineyard area. So I hope that they've had an opportunity to really get to know each other over those few months. Typically, you're dating, you go out a few times a week, but hopefully maybe they concentrated it a bit more and they've been with each other a little bit more in those few months to really get to know each other. But I think communication is really important when issues come up, making sure that you're able to communicate and work through that. I don't know if they would have had the opportunity to do that in a couple of months. Maybe they have, maybe not.
But I think also the timing is interesting of when they got together. I'm always talking about this, cuffing season, and over the holidays, people really feel that pull to be in a relationship, but it's also highly stressful. As you probably know, January is also divorce month. So the intensity of the holidays can potentially give them more of a sense of what it will be like, because I'm sure they must have spent some time together over the holidays, maybe some family activities. But yeah, I just in general, I really believe in slow love. And I think you can get married after knowing someone only a short time. But then your discovery period starts now. And the difference is your discovery period is happening when you're already committed to this person. So it will be very interesting to see how this unfolds for her.
It's a bit different since her last relationship, because I know that she was really open with that relationship. So it seems like with this one, she's a little more closed off and keeping things a bit more private. So I'm just curious to see how it pans out. We'll see.
Well, they did go Instagram official after Ellen DeGeneres' it was her birthday party, right? So they've been on the gram. It's been out there, but yeah.
I think
not quite
in
the
like
same
it
way
was before. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You have your experiences, and hopefully you learn from them. And then she said, "Oh, I don't want to do that again," because it was everywhere, and everybody was like, oh, "They broke up," and then everyone's in your business,
right?
And she's trying to keep it cute and funny. She's not trying to have her business all in the streets.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about successful relationships and how couples can really prepare themselves for relationship success. And on your website, Rhonda Smith, lcsw.com, you have a lot of great content there, but there was something that really caught my eye about recommended relationship rituals.
Yes.
Yeah, I really was drawn to this because I was actually talking with a former client recently who was saying that her relationship kind of has ebbed and flowed. They've been married now for a few years, and she was saying like they're not as physically intimate as they used to be when they were first together. They were, at it like bunnies. Sorry again, Dad.
Of
but,
course. To be expected.
But then it's sort of work pressures and life pressures came in, and there's not as much of the physical intimacy. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about these relationship rituals and how you can maintain it when real life hits. Like this is what Amy Schumer is about to encounter. It's about to get real. It's not the fantasy.
Right.
You're really in the relationship. What are some of the relationship rituals that you recommend?
So in terms of relationship rituals, first, typically when I'm working with clients, I feel like it's really important to prioritize and be really specific about what it is that you have going on in your life at any given time. And I actually ask people to write these down. So I'll typically ask them to give me a top 5. So if your marriage is there, you want to rank that. If you have children, you want to rank that. If it's spirituality, if it's your career, whatever it is. And then based on that ranking, I will work with people to develop rituals around those priorities. What happens a lot as time goes on in our relationships and we do have other pressures, it's easy for those things to sometimes get in the way of what we would like our priorities to be. So a lot of the ways I challenge my clients are, you say that your marriage is a priority, you say relationship is a priority. But if we're looking at your decision making and your behaviors, does that really match what you think you're doing? So in terms of the relationship, rituals can be, it can be as simple as like a check-in every evening before bed, TV off, just time for the two of you to check in. A ritual could be like texting during the day, texting over lunch, if you want to Skype each other during lunch or FaceTime. It can also be like a weekly ritual if it's not a daily ritual, if it's not something you can maintain, something weekly that you guys can do together just to kind of check in and be sure that you are in tune with one another emotionally, because it's very easy to get stuck in routines, day-to-day routines, and you can become roommates if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. And what happens is sometimes we have folks who share more with their coworkers or colleagues because they spend so much time with them, and they end up kind of pouring their hearts out to those people versus their actual partner when they get home because they're just stuck in a routine. So we always want to make sure that we shift that focus and make sure that those conversations are happening at home versus in the workplace or anywhere else.
That's great advice. And as you're saying, making that time to connect with your partner, and we're going to talk later in technically dating about what happens when your partner is now connecting with someone else. But sometimes, and I'm a mom, you're a mom too, sometimes you don't feel so sexy.
No.
But in your blog, you talk about keeping it sexy. So even though you might not want to have sex every day, who got the time for that? Right?
It's not, yeah.
And maybe producer
Not
Thomas.
so much. Not so much.
He almost did a spit take. But are there ways that you can keep the intimacy alive even if you're not actually having sex on a daily basis?
Absolutely. There are definitely ways to keep intimacy alive. One of the really important points that I want to make, we talk a lot about, spending time with our partner, quality time, making sure we have alone time. But I also think it's equally as important to make sure that you have time away from your spouse. So whether it's with friends, other folks that you want to hang out with, to make sure that you have a good sense of yourself and that you're not losing yourself. I think when you do that, it's a lot easier to keep the relationship sexy because you're not so dependent on your partner for everything to be, your ultimate partner, they're your confidant, they're everything. Sometimes that's a little too much pressure for one person to manage.
That's something that I've seen as a big cultural shift in dating. Because before, when you were just kind of marrying someone that was in your social circle or went to your church or lived across the street, you weren't looking for someone to match you like boom, 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 boom on all these levels. Like now when I coach singles and I say, what are you looking for? I mean, we're there for 45 minutes just getting the list on point. And, you know, it used to be before like, well, security and,
they're a good person.
You know, sexual attraction and they're close with their family. You know, now there's so many things because we're expecting our partners to be all things to us at all times. And I know you also offer what you call relationship coaching, but it's really also a preparation for a relationship for singles. Can you tell us a little bit about how that program that you run operates and the kind of questions that you ask people to examine before they get into a relationship?
Yeah, so I have a 6-week relationship coaching program, and it kind of takes you through the gamut. So what I'm focusing on for now is people who are maybe they've been heartbroken, maybe they're divorced, maybe they're just kind of a little burned out with dating and they want to try something different. And it's a 6-week process that'll kind of take them from beginning to end in terms of exploring maybe some issues that might have come up in childhood briefly. We get a lot of messaging as kids regarding what relationships should look like. So oftentimes we either want it to look exactly like our parents had it or the
nothing.
The complete opposite. It rarely is it in between. So kind of teasing out some of that messaging and some of the issues that we got as children. And then we'll touch on a bit about previous relationships and any issues that they may have encountered in previous relationships and working through maybe any issues of resistance or trust. And just, I think it's really important when you're approaching dating to have a really, really solid sense of self. When you're trying to go out and meet somebody and you're not solid on your own, you're going to attract like the worst partners ever. And they can sniff it out and they can smell it. If you're not confident and secure with yourself, that's when you get the folks that aren't so.
You'll keep working through your issues through the people that you're meeting until you're ready to really address them on your own.
Yep.
And you have so much more advice and access to this program at Rhonda Smith, RHONDA Smith, LCSW.com. I'd love for you to stick around with us because we have questions from our listeners in Technically Dating coming up in a moment.
Sounds good.
Good. And before we go to that, though, we have a special guest who's joining us now via Skype, Pastor Calvin from Married at First Sight. You know, when he's not so busy being a reality television star, he's usually spending his time as a marriage counselor and motivational speaker to re-educate married America. Along with his wife, Wendy, Pastor Cal leads interactive discussions, revealing dialogue and spiritual insight that allow couples to address their challenges and sharpen their success. So please give big smooches to Pastor Calvin.
Hey.
I am so glad that you're with us, Pastor Cal. Oh, we are big fans of yours here at the Dates and Mates show. And
so cool.
I know you've been doing this a long time. It didn't start with Married at First Sight. You've been helping couples stay together for many, many years, and you and your wife have your Married and Naked series, which is
Married and Naked.
Very, very hot. Too hot for Dates and Mates. No, but it's really about teaching people how to be emotionally more transparent, right, with their partners?
Absolutely. Married and Naked has to do with emotional transparency and communicative transparency. We have found and believe that when couples are completely naked with each other in their emotions and their communication, that if I show you who I really am, then you will know who I am. And you don't have to guess about anything. I heard from years ago, a psychologist told me, she said, she was presenting something. And the first thing she said is, I'm going to tell you all my business. Because if I tell you everything about me, you have nothing to gossip about. And so that's one of the whole idea behind it, with Married and Naked.
So what is it that makes couples stay together?
Couples stay together when they understand commitment. And I think so many couples now don't understand what commitment is and or what it means to be committed to a relationship. And it's so interesting to me because we'll commit to jobs, we'll commit to you name it, careers, sports. I mean, we'll commit to any number of things. But when it comes to committing to another person, we often feel like we have leeway to drop the ball. But commitment says that I'm making up my mind. I'm making an intentional decision to stay with you no matter what. It's pure and simple. Just be committed, make up your mind you're going to do it, and do it.
And people always say to me, "Oh, marriage is work. Marriage is work." And I've been married 10 years, almost 11. And I know. In Hollywood years, that's like 75, okay?
That's 75 years.
But I really personally don't feel like marriage is work. I think it's just what you said. It's commitment, and it's a requirement to continually show up day after day. And Rhonda Richards-Smith is here with me as well, and she's a therapist, and she's also married. Do you think marriage is work?
I don't think marriage is work. I think sometimes it's
work. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think sometimes it's work. Maybe if you haven't selected the right mate, I feel like in those cases it might feel like work. Because maybe you haven't chosen the right partner.
Good point.
We've been married for 14, almost 15 years.
Good.
So it doesn't feel like work, but that's also because I'm confident in knowing that I married the right person.
Yeah, I'm sure you see this a lot in your work, Pastor Cal. And on Married at First Sight, you were going to make another point on that.
I believe that marriage is more than, someone told me once that marriage is like a business. I don't believe that. I believe that marriage is work, but I think that, it was such an eloquent point that it's work, but it's not tedious work. Okay. When marriage becomes tedious, when marriage becomes laborious, that's a different thing. I don't mind work when it's productive. I don't mind work when it's bringing me satisfaction. I don't mind work when it's bringing me joy and it's giving me a goal, something to reach toward. That's good work. And so marriage is good work.
Yeah. I like this kind of work.
Yeah.
It's wonderful work.
It's rewarding. Yeah, absolutely.
It is. And you make a really good point. And I love my work here. So it doesn't feel like when I come into the studio, it doesn't feel like work. And I look at my relationship in the same way. And I want to continue to show up for it. I want to kind of go back to a point that Rhonda said in choosing the right partner from the beginning. And this is something that I know is a big theme on Married at First Sight, because you and the other experts are choosing someone not based on butterflies or chemistry, but someone that you really feel is a good match. And Pastor Cal, themes of intimacy, I know, come up a lot with these couples. It kind of seems like a Goldilocks situation is happening, because it's like Shawnice and Jeff T are too hot, and Molly and Jonathan are too cold, and Jacqueline and Ryan, they seem like they're maybe a little just right. I'd love to know, as these people that you've put them together to be married, and based on factors of long-term compatibility and who you think is really the right match, but then they get together and they might not have that attraction or intimacy right away. How do you feel intimacy plays into this experiment?
This is such a complex experiment, and I wish that people who were viewing it understood just how complex this is. With all the testing and all the psychometric testing and interviews, et cetera, that we go through, at the end of the day, there's an X factor that we cannot account for. And that intimacy, when two people see each other, and it's sort of like, something happens. I mean, we can make you physically compatible. We can look at what your likes are, et cetera, what your personality traits are. We can do all that. When it comes to the physical compatibility, which we want our couples to have. We want them to feel intimate. We want them to feel close. We want them to feel like they want to be together. That's something that you can't really account for. We can do it all on paper. I pray about it. But when it comes to that, it's almost like, if they do the work, I believe intimacy can grow. It can build because all the building blocks are there. But it just takes patience, and it takes time, and it takes that openness and nakedness and just sharing your heart with each other, because all these couples are correctly mated. They're correctly matched. And I believe that all of them have the opportunity for great success.
Yeah, I think you guys did a great job with these couples. And it's sort of like what we were just saying. When you are in the right relationship, sometimes your stuff comes up, right? And the things that you've brought in from your childhood, from your parental relationships, that bubbles up to the surface. What do you feel like these couples need to learn in the next few weeks of this experiment to determine whether or not they're going to stay together in this marriage?
They need to learn to listen. They need to learn to listen to their spouses. I believe there was a reason God gave us, 2 ears and one mouth, because He wants us to listen. And I think that the more you listen and the more you're open, it's amazing how much you can learn. And not only listen to what their spouse is saying, but listen to what their spouse is not saying. We give them exercises and these are exercises so they can learn to communicate. I've always believed that there's a difference, in talking to, talking with, and talking at. And I think our couples need to learn how to communicate patiently and to talk with each other. Don't talk at each other. Talking at is like talking to a subordinate, to a child or a pet or something. Talking to is like giving instruction. And we all do that from time to time. But the talking with is the goal. So if they can listen and learn how to talk to one another with patience and kindness, their success is sure because all the other things, we vetted them and all the other things are there.
Mm-hmm. And I saw on this last week's episode, they're also discovering one another's history because it's sort of like you're doing the courtship backwards where they're married and then now they're having to get to know each other. And in last week's episode, Molly and Jonathan were dealing with the issues that were coming up. It was Jacqueline and Ryan were dealing with the issues that were coming up from Jacqueline's deceased boyfriend. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I thought he was being a little bit callous with her in not wanting her to feel her feelings of the past. But at a certain point, you have to take the past for the past and be able to move forward and forge ahead into the future, right?
And I want to speak to that just briefly because and I've heard, Twitter was a buzz with this, even in my conversation with her. Jacqueline, even prior to coming to Married at First Sight, Jacqueline has gone through grief counseling. She's a remarkable young lady. She really, really is. And Jacqueline, with this tragic thing happening to her, she's gone through her own personal grief counseling. She's reconciled it, and she's actually positioned what has happened to her correctly in her mind. She will never get over it. Excuse me. She'll never get over it. But I think that Jacqueline she shouldn't dismiss it, but she has to put it in the right place. But the onus here is actually on Ryan. Ryan has to be more patient. Mm-hmm. He has to not be mechanical and only do the things, like I said earlier, that he thinks a husband should do. He actually honestly has to feel her pain. He has to feel what she's going through, and he has to feel that he has to be, that rock that he claims that he is for her, because she needs that, because she's an incredible, incredible young lady.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying watching all of the couples discover themselves while they discover their partner. Can you tell us, I know you can't give us all of the juice, but can you just give us some highlights of what we can expect to see the rest of the season?
Oh my gosh, you're going to see highs and lows. You're going to see laughing and crying. This is probably one of the more exciting seasons we've had. The couples are very, very complex, and we've heard, with Jeffy and Shawnice, their relationship is starting slow. Then we saw in this last episode, it's speeding up, and then it's going to take some more turns. We've seen with Ryan and Jacqueline, they started fast, and then they're going to slow up a little. We've seen with John and Molly how they have sort of stalemated. Yeah. But I think you're going to see some different nuances there. So it's going to be a roller coaster ride. That's all I can say. It's going to be a roller coaster. Well, but we have the highest hopes for the couples without giving any spoilers.
Well, thank you for that. We do have high hopes for the rest of the season, and you can watch Married at First Sight Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Lifetime. Thank you so much for joining us, Pastor Cal.
It has been my extreme pleasure. I was sorry for the tardiness, but
we're glad that you're here.
Atlanta traffic is horrible.
That's what we get with a live show. You never know what will happen, but the gems of wisdom you dropped on us today are worth it. are totally worth it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And you can also find more information on Pastor Cal at calvinroberson.com. That's Calvin, ROBERSON.com, and start your own journey to long-term love on his website. So Rhonda Richards-Smith is still with me to answer your questions. And Rhonda is a therapist. Just as a reminder, if you're joining us late, she's an award-winning psychotherapist and relationship expert. And we have questions, girl. We have questions from our listeners that have come in from blackpeoplemeet.com, where you can also get 1 week free if you are a listener of Dates and Mates. It's the premier dating site for Black singles, and they're a partner of Technically Dating. And get your 1 week free trial at blackpeoplemeet.com/datesandmates, as well as the Techspert app, which is a crowdsourced an app for crowdsourced advice for your drama, which you can download at the App Store. So are we ready to do?
I believe we're ready.
Technically Dating.
Technically Dating.
Okay, you ready for this, Rhonda?
I'm ready.
This one comes to us from a woman who says she's in a new marriage. And she says, my husband and I met exactly a year ago and got married in October. Okay. He had some old crushes on social media, and I asked him why, if he talked to them in the past, is he liking all of their posts? I didn't think it would be an issue. I like posts, but this is ridiculous. I feel completely uncomfortable. He told me it was because he used to work with them and to get job leads. And then he said, I don't want you dictating what I do on social media. I am disgusted. He never acted this way before. Please, can we give this lady from Chicago, Illinois some help, Rhonda?
They're going to have a really tough conversation. I think, especially as a new wife, it's really important to express and be clear on what your expectations are for your marriage. And everybody's different. So for some people, this might be completely fine for you to like your ex's posts or your ex-crush's posts. It might be okay. But it's clear that it's not okay with her. And so she's going to really have a serious sit down with him. And kind of separate her emotions from it a bit and just explain that this is a boundary that she has, what her expectations are for her as the husband. And if he can't meet those, then I think that might come up with other issues over time. This is just one issue that's happening right now, but it's really important that he respect how she feels. And, he'll live. If he doesn't like the posts, I'm sure he'll be fine. He'll live. He'll be okay. But she's going to have a serious sit down with him to really express why it is that's bothering her.
Yeah. And sometimes, we gals, we get a little over animated about things. So when she's saying he's liking all of their posts, is he really liking all of their posts? Or is he just keeping, he's saying their work contacts as well. Is he keeping just a professional connection there? I think, like you said, it's important for her to express how she's being triggered by it, but also be open to listening to what he has to say. And if he really feels like he's not micro cheating, he's not doing anything wrong, and then he has to also be willing. She has to hear him, and he has to be willing to be transparent about that, because it is kind of a slippery slope.
And you also have to consider what kind of posts they are.
Sure.
We don't have the specifics. So, if they're particularly...
It's like a bikini shot.
I might have some issues if you're repeatedly liking someone's, just the bikini photos. Like, choosing the bikini photos over, the business attire. So it kind of depends on the content of the post, too, I think.
I've noticed that on my social media, I have male friends and I have female friends, and anything that's like a bikini shot or like a pretty picture or anything where I'm posting a BET article I wrote about sex, it'll be all women. The guys are like, I ain't touching that.
Not touching it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
But I think that's good. I'm a married lady, and many of them are married. You have to have certain boundaries. And it is a slippery slope, as I was starting to say. It can start with a little bit of liking the post, and the next thing you know, somebody's sliding in the DM, and the next thing you know, people are having work drinks after work, a little happy hour.
To discuss their Instagram posts.
It's a slippery slope, y'all, so be careful. This one comes to us from a young female. She says, so my best friend got asked out today by a guy I dated 3 years ago. that started to bring up old feelings, and their first date is tomorrow. And I'm going because I'm just that weird. Okay, I don't know what to do. Please help. So first of all, let's dissect this because this is a two-parter. One, the fact that her best friend is going out with this guy she dated 3 years ago and she's having feelings about it, I think is part A. And then part B is, why is she going on this date with him?
I don't understand that.
Okay, so let's put that aside and deal with part A.
Yeah.
Is girl code strong enough where she should not be, her best friend should not be going out with this guy if they dated? What's the rule for you? If you went out once, is it okay? If you went out and made out, is it not okay? If you've had sex or if you've had a long-term relationship, are there levels that make it okay?
There are levels, and it really depends, because I will say this. I do know some women who, they date. They meet different people they date, and they date quite a bit. And if you have a group of friends and you're all actively dating, maybe in similar circles, it's really tough. You claim 50 different guys and you can never go out with any of those guys ever at any point in the future. It can be a little dicey, especially if those relationships were really superficial. So especially if there was really nothing there, if you went on a date and it was just they're better as a friend or an acquaintance, just wasn't a match. I don't necessarily think that means 3 years later that they shouldn't be able to go out with that person. But it really depends on what kind of relationship that they shared.
But she's being triggered by it, so there must have been something deeper.
For her, maybe.
For her. Mm-hmm.
Maybe. But I think sometimes that's up for interpretation because it would depend on also what his perspective would be if that was something that was particularly significant. If it's a one and done, But some women are really, really feel connected after one date or one meeting. That's tricky.
I'm just a strong believer in girl code.
I know.
And I know you're right. Intellectually, I know you're right. But emotionally, I think I'm siding with her. Speaking of emotions, we have a female who's 20 that's telling us, Rhonda Smith, that she's depressed. She says, I'm depressed because of a breakup that happened a couple days ago. And it's bothering me so much that I just want to feel like myself again. I can't stop thinking of him. What should I do? Do you have strategies that you use in your psychotherapy practice to help people move on after a breakup?
Absolutely. So I think particularly in 2018, you kind of have to go on a social media fast. And I know people don't like the idea of going on a social media fast. But
they social media hungry.
Yeah, I know.
Sometimes the fast is what you need to reset.
Especially if you're getting over a breakup, if you have mutual friends, if you're kind of starting to check their, your ex-partner's social media kind of impulsively, you can really go down a rabbit hole. And if you're not careful, it's really tough to get out of it if you keep doing it. So sometimes you have to kind of take a break from the technology a bit. And get out and do something interesting, do something on your own. It's just been a couple of days, right? So it's going to take some time. It's been a couple of days. It might be a few months before you really feel like yourself again. But surrounding yourself with good friends, making sure that you have a good confidant, someone that you can confide in if you're particularly feeling down. But I think taking the social media fast and really cutting the cord with your ex is really important because sometimes when people are breaking up, they're still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I think it's really important to set the boundary if you're not together anymore to really and truly cut the cord.
Yes. I'm really glad that you said that because I think people forget the social media factor. And on top of that, I would like to say that it's okay to feel sad.
Absolutely.
I think also because of the social media pressure to always look like your life is perfect and things are going okay, we feel like we can't have our feelings. I mean, you just get over it and move on. But it's okay. You had a breakup. That's a loss that you need to allow yourself to mourn and get through. So go through the sad time, and then if you don't feel like yourself, do something that makes you feel like yourself. I think the tendency when you have a breakup or something depressing or, you lose a job or something else, you want to just retreat and become a hermit and sit with your feelings And it's no wonder you don't feel like yourself if you're not doing anything that makes you feel like you.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
get back out there, girl.
Isolation is like a big no-no, especially if you're not feeling well. So definitely kind of force yourself to get out there and do some things that you love and be around people that you love and that love you.
That's great advice. We don't have time for one more question. I could see. I'm not even looking at producer Thomas. I just see him out of the corner of my eye, just already shaking his head. No, it's not going to happen.
No.
But you have so much more advice at Rhonda Smith, LCSW.com. Any parting words of wisdom for the people that are longing for the kind of relationship that you have and that you help people build?
I think that when you're looking at trying to establish a relationship over the long term, it's just really, really important that you do the work to be sure that you are able and willing to be vulnerable with your partner, even with the person that you're dating. It requires a certain level of openness and vulnerability, and it's tough when you're out there dating. It's tough to maintain it, but if you do so in the long run, it's really going to benefit you.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
There's so much more at Rhonda Smith, LCSW.com. That's RHONDA Smith. You got to know how to spell Smith.
I hope so.
Yeah. And LCSW.com. And also, don't forget to watch Married at First Sight, Tuesdays at 9 p.m. on Lifetime. You can see more relationship building strategies from Pastor Cal and his wife Wendy at calvinroberson.com. And if you're single and you're ready to mingle, why not hop on over to blackpeoplemeet.com. Get your 1 week free from being a Dates and Mates listener at blackpeoplemeet.com/datesandmates. And don't forget to download the Textpert app. I'm your host, Damona Hoffman. We'll be back next week with more dating and relationship advice. You can find me online at damonahoffman.com. And until next week, love y'all and wish you happy dating.